welcome to my video about how to do a 5-in-1 or a 3-in-1 pickup on thumb gusset. This is a stitch name that I have devised for my own patterns, and I've had several people ask me to make a video about what I mean by that. And it's a way that I have of picking up your thumb stitches on a thumb gusset so that you do not have a gap. Now unfortunately this black yarn makes it difficult to see, so I won't be using black on my demo yarn, thumb today, but just to show you, this is for my son's hand, but you can see that there really isn't much of a gap. There's a little bit on that side, but not as much of a gap as there would be on a typical pick up one stitch on a thumb gusset. So I typically hold my thumb stitches on a piece of yarn because it makes it really easy to work with while I'm working the rest of the hand. This is a new pattern I'm working on. I haven't quite decided what to call it, something like Marvin K. Mooney mitts or something. So then I put my stitches, I put them onto 3 needles. I'll show you this. Try to get most of the stitches onto the first 2 needles because I'm going to need more space on my last needle for the pickup stitches. And I've got 13 to work with here, so putting 5 on my first 2 needles. Okay, I've got all my stitches put onto needles now, but I still have my yarn in there, so I'm going to pull it out. Alright, now is when we begin our pickup. Now on worsted weight and and finer yarn, I usually do a 5-in-1 pickup. Sometimes on worsted weight I will do a 3-in-1 pickup, and definitely on a bulkier yarn I would only do a 3-in-1 pickup. And what this basically means is that instead of only picking up one stitch here across the top of the gusset where I cast on one when I was going on to make the rest of the hand, I am actually going to pick up either 5 stitches or only 3 stitches, depending on whether I'm doing a 5-in-1 or 3-in-1. And then I'm going to very quickly decrease those stitches over the next several rows to make a nice solid gusset top there. Okay, so if I was to do a 5-in-1 pickup, I would start it. Okay, I'm sorry, this is black. This is the project I had going. I hope you can see this. This is the cast on stitch. I'm gonna leave that there for a minute so that you guys can see that. We're gonna stick this gray needle in that stitch so you can see that while I'm working out, showing you where these other stitches go. So that is my picked up stitch. If you were just doing a typical pick up one across the top, that is the stitch you would go into. So when I'm picking up my stitches, I put all my stitches onto the needles, and then I actually just start knitting. I'm right-handed, so I start knitting from the right side. I call this the right side here, all the way across. And then we're going to do our pickup once we get around to that spot. I'm going to take this extra one out for the moment because I've got enough needles going on. Now my personal preference is to use double pointed needles for all small in the round knitting projects, just because I knit fairly firmly, and I find that when I use circular needles I have a really difficult time getting my needles back, or my stitches back on the needle at the end of the cable, so because they're just so tight by then. So I just like double pointed needles because it keeps every stitch the same size. Okay, I got so many comments about the black being too hard to understand these instructions on that I whipped up another project so I can show you the rest of these instructions using this lighter gold color. And again, this is just another new pattern I'm working on. It's going to be called the Twisted Rope Fingerless Mittens, and they will match my free pattern, the Twisted Rope Hat. So you can see they've got the twisted rope cable at the top and the bottom. But I use this technique, of course, on like every thumb I make. So I'm just going to stuff my extra yarn down in the middle so it's not in my way. I may regret that in a moment, but we'll see. Okay, so I've already picked up my yarn and knit around my existing picked up stitches on this one. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to knit. You can see I've got the bars here. Make sure that's nice and in focus. Okay, so I've got the bars between my gusset and the main part of the mitten. And I'm not going to knit into the top bar. I'm going to knit into the one below that as my first stitch. This is for 5-in-1 pickup only. If I was knitting for 3-in-1 pickup, I would actually look here. This is my little cast on stitch I used for my, I just did a knit cast on for this, I think. No, sorry, a slip stitch. I'm totally blanking. I'll put it in the captions later. But anyway, so I just did my one stitch cast on. So if I was doing a 3-in-1 pickup, I'd actually skip this bar one, and I would go into the stitch beside that cast on stitch, and I would knit into that as well as this bar. So I'd actually have 2 pieces of yarn that I'm knitting into, because, and I'm going to be doing that for my 5-in-1 anyways. 5-in-1 just adds the extra ones up the side. So for 3-in-1, I'm going to go into this stitch beside and that one. But because I'm going to show you 5-in-1 first, I'm going to knit into this bar here. I'm going to arrange it so that the right leg is in front, just as if it was a picked up stitch. And then I'm actually going to knit into the back leg so that it twists, almost like making a make one. And that's another way to close up the gaps here, is to make that little twist in there. Okay, now I'm going to go into that stitch beside the main cast on stitch, and this is where I'd start if I was doing a 3-in-1 pickup. And I don't need to twist this one. I'm just going to knit straight into it. Oh, wait a second. I lied. I do need to twist this one. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, depending on how thick the yarn I'm working with is. For bulky yarn, I don't always do it. Worsted yarn, it's kind of like how I'm feeling that day. And fingering weight yarn, I generally do. Honestly, worsted weight yarn is probably depending on how tight my tension was when I was doing that. Okay, now I've just gone into the original cast on stitch that I put in above my thumb gusset. And I don't need to twist this one, because as you can see, when you go in there, you got that little bit of bottom of the knot there, because I do that little knotted stitch. And then I've also got like all this yarn on either side. So for me, because I use this very tight cast on stitch, I don't need to go and do a twist as well. It's kind of like all I can do to get my needle through there so I can actually knit into it. But if you did a looser stitch as your cast on stitch, say you just did a twist, you might want to twist this as well. Okay, now I'm going to go into the stitch on this side of the cast on stitch, and if I was doing a 3-in-1 pickup, this would be my 3rd stitch that I'm going into. But I've got like the edge of the stitch plus the bar, so that still gives me that 2. And if I want to, I can twist this. Kind of want to today. Okay, now I've gotten to my 5th stitch of my 5-in-1 pickup, and I'm sorry, my battery went dead, so it's a little bit gapey already because I actually did it, and then my battery died in the middle. And so I've had to pull it kind of out again. But you're gonna look in this gap between the thumb and the main mitten again, and you're gonna go not in the top bar, but in the one below. So I'm just gonna pick that up with my spare needle. Straight across like that, okay? And even though in this case we've got the left leg on the front, that's totally fine. We're still gonna knit into the back leg. And what that is gonna do is gonna create this little twist here, which again helps close this up. Okay, so now if I just done a normal pick up across here, I would have only actually picked up 1 stitch. I had 3 on there to begin with, but now as you can see, I've got 5 extra stitches here. If I were doing 3-in-1, I'd only have these 3 in the middle, so I'd have 3 extra stitches, okay? So now I'm gonna knit around. Now I do need to leave a bit of a tail because there is gonna be a slight gap right here. And that's what I'm gonna need to close up when I'm done. if any of you have a really wonderful trick for making there be no gap at that point, please leave it in the comments. I would love to hear it. If you're someone who loses track of your stitches easily, or like me, you like to watch TV or something while you're doing this, you might want to actually add a little stitch marker at the beginning of that 5-in-1 pickup so you don't forget where it starts. Because I'm making a video, I know exactly where it starts because I'm paying attention to it. So it starts here. This is the beginning of my 5 extra stitches. So now I've just knit around on the other stitches of the thumb. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a slip slip knit to decrease these to 2 stitches immediately. Then I'm going to do a knit 1 into the one in the one picked up stitch, or cast on stitch, and then I'm going to do a knit 2 together on this side to decrease those very quickly. Now I still have 2 extra stitches on that one gusset stitch. If I was doing a 3-in-1 pickup, I wouldn't have to do that stage. I would skip right next to the next, right to the next time around, the one that we'll be doing next time, which is a double central decrease to get these all into one. So let's go around and do that. Now, depending on the size of the mitten, sometimes, like if it's for larger hands, this is for my son's hand, but if I was doing it for an adult hand, I might do one just straight knit round here. But any kid's hand, for sure, you need to decrease as quickly as possible because their thumbs do not stay very wide here for as long as for an adult hand. So okay, now we're down to our 3 stitches. I am not going to knit straight across this time. I'm just going to show you how to do this double central decrease, or how I do it. So I want this stitch to be the one on top. So what I'm going to do first is I'm actually going to go into both of these stitches together as though to knit, and I'm going to pull them off. And then I'm going to go into the next stitch as though to knit, and I'm going to pull that off. So I've now twisted these 2 together around, and I've twisted that one around together. Now I'm going to take my left needle and I'm going to go into all 3 of those stitches. It's like I'm putting these back on the left needle, but I'm not going to go through the ridiculous amount of work it would take to take the right needle out and then stick it back in. That would be silly. So now I've got all 3 stitches on both needles. I am going to knit through them. I split my yarn there a little bit. Okay, there we go. So now I've decreased both those stitches at once, and the one in the center is the one that's on top. The other ones are going to appear to disappear into it. I will go around one more time, but I am now down to the original number of stitches that I should have, which is 1. This can be substituted for picking up the top of any gusset where you have 1 cast on stitch on the hand, and you want to reduce the gap. It also adds a little bit of extra yarn there to minimize wear and tear, because that part of the thumb does get a lot of wear and tear and tends to wear out quickly, especially if you're using acrylic yarn. I do not recommend ever using acrylic yarn for hand coverings, personally. It doesn't last very long. Trust me, I've had to mend way too many acrylic mittens. Okay, so here it is another time around. You can see that row going straight up the middle there, and that came from our original 5 stitches very quickly down to our 1 stitch, and then you just proceed with your pattern as it calls for in the pattern. On some of my patterns, I have actually experimented with doing a 5-in-1 pickup between fingers on a glove. I did not do that on this particular pattern. This one I only did 1. But I have done it before, and in that case you would actually have your bar pick up in between the fingers down, and then you would proceed just exactly as we did on that thumb gusset today. Alright, so I hope this helps you to make new gap-free mitten thumbs, and for those of you who are using my patterns, this is actually explained with codes and pictures and explanations in the pattern itself, so you would have that to refer to as well. Have a great day, and thanks for watching.